The most dangerous sentence in a large company is not no, it is let's align internally. Because in a small company, a simple decision can take 5 minutes. In a corporation, the same decision becomes a meeting series, a PowerPoint deck, a budget review, a legal check, a regional alignment call, and finally, if everyone is still alive, a steering committee. And by the time the company is ready to move, the market has already moved on. Big companies do not move slowly because nobody is working. That is the first mistake people make. Inside large organizations, everyone is busy. Calendars are full, inboxes are full, dashboards are updated, meetings are scheduled, pre-meetings prepare the actual meetings, follow-up meetings clarify what the previous meeting failed to decide. There is motion everywhere. But motion is not the same as decision. The real problem is that every decision in a large company has to survive the organization before it can reach the customer. A decision does not simply need to be right. It needs to be explainable, defensible, politically acceptable, budget compatible, legally safe, regionally aligned, and preferably phrased in a way that no senior executive can misunderstand on slide 17. That is why large companies become slow. Not because they lack intelligence, but because intelligence gets trapped inside structure. A simple decision usually begins innocently. Someone asks, "Should we do this?" And then the organization responds the only way it knows. Who needs to be involved? Who owns the budget? Has legal seen it? What does finance think? Did we ask the regions? Should we inform leadership? Do we need a steering committee? Suddenly, the decision is no longer a decision. It is a journey. And every stop on that journey adds something, a comment, a condition, a risk, a dependency, a revised slide, a new version of the file. Approvals are supposed to create responsibility, but too many approvals often create the opposite, because when everyone approves something, nobody truly owns it. Here's the uncomfortable part. Slow systems are often created by smart people. Not lazy people, not incompetent people, smart people. Because inside a large company, fast decisions create visible accountability. If you say yes quickly and the decision fails, everyone knows where to look. But if the decision was aligned across 8 departments, reviewed by 3 managers, documented in 2 systems, and presented in a committee, then failure becomes much more comfortable. Not successful. Comfortable. The organization can say, "We followed the process." And in corporate life, that sentence has saved more careers than great ideas ever have. Nokia is one of the best examples of this problem. The simple version of the story says Nokia failed because it missed the smartphone, but that is too easy. Nokia was not a company without technology. It had talent, it had engineers, it had resources, it had brand power. It even had early smartphone thinking long before the iPhone became the symbol of the category. The Nokia 9000 communicator launched in 1996 and already combined mobile communication with email, fax, web browsing, and business tools. It looked primitive today, but conceptually it understood something very important. The phone was becoming more than a phone. The problem was not that Nokia knew nothing. The problem was that Nokia's organization struggled to turn knowledge into the right strategic action fast enough. Analysts have pointed to several internal issues: hardware dominance, difficulty prioritizing software and platforms, internal rivalries, growing bureaucracy, and slow adaptation to ecosystem-based competition. That's the real corporate truth. A company can have the future inside the building and still fail to ship the future to the market. Kodak is another famous case, but again, the simple version is misleading. People often say Kodak failed because it did not understand digital photography. But Kodak did understand digital photography. A Kodak engineer, Steve Sasson, built the first digital still camera prototype in 1975. The issue was deeper. Digital photography was not just a new product, it was a threat to the entire business model that made Kodak powerful. Kodak made film, processing, and printing. Digital photography attacked the economic engine behind the company's success. So the future was not simply an opportunity, it was politically dangerous. Because in large companies, the future often has to ask permission from the past, and the past usually has a bigger budget. Microsoft shows the internal incentive version of the same pattern. For years, Microsoft was associated with a performance management system known as stack ranking. The idea was to force managers to rank employees into performance categories. In theory, it was supposed to drive high performance. In practice, critics argued that it created internal competition, politics, and defensive behavior. Reporting on Microsoft's so-called lost decade described stack ranking as one of the cultural problems inside the company, with employees focusing on competing with each other rather than competing with outside rivals. Microsoft ended the system in 2013. The lesson is not that performance management is bad. The lesson is that incentives shape behavior. If you make employees compete internally for survival, don't be surprised when they optimize for internal survival. And when the internal game becomes more important than the customer, speed dies. Different companies, different industries, same pattern. Nokia shows the cost of slow adaptation. Kodak shows the cost of protecting the past. Microsoft shows the cost of internal competition. The mistake is to think these companies failed because they didn't have smart people. They had smart people. That's what makes the story interesting. The problem was that the organization became harder to move than the market. Bureaucracy slows the decision. Politics reshapes the decision. Legacy profits resist the decision. Fear dilutes the decision. And then when the final version finally arrives, it's often weaker, safer, and later than the original idea. Now, to be fair, large companies do need some slowness. A two-person startup can make a risky decision in a morning. A global company can't always do that. It has customers, regulators, employees, shareholders, suppliers, legal exposure, brand risk, and operational complexity. Some process is necessary. The problem starts when the company can no longer tell the difference between responsible caution and institutional fear. Responsible caution asks, what are the risks? Institutional fear asks, how do I avoid being blamed? That's the turning point. That's when process stops protecting the company and starts protecting the people inside the company from the consequences of choosing. So why are big companies so slow? Not because nobody is working, not because they lack resources, not because all managers are useless. They're slow because every decision must travel through bureaucracy, politics, legacy systems, and fear before it can become action. And in that journey, the decision changes. It becomes safer, more acceptable, more aligned, and often less useful. The most dangerous thing in a large company is not always a bad idea. Sometimes it's a good idea that took too long to become acceptable. Big companies don't lose because they lack motion. They lose because motion is not the same as decision. This is corporate truth, the invisible rules behind how companies really work.